Hey guys, tonight's guest, Morgan Knudsen, will be talking about people who receive donor organs, and then little by little they start feeling getting weird personality traits, rather. Could it be from the organs? We're going to find out in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to California Haunts Radio. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of Sacramento, California, but we're 45 strong. What that means is that we're located up and down the state of California. So if you have any paranormal needs, shoot me an email, shoot me a personal message over at CaliforniaHaunts.com or CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com, maybe even Facebook, and I'll get back to you and we can set up an appointment to meet. Okay? Because we have people all over the state, they can get to you, right? Almost every county in the state of California, and if not, they're willing to drive. All right. So that's what we provide, services free of charge to come out and investigate your home for paranormal activity. We may not find it. It may be something that, something normal normal that's causing the issue. That's what we go out for. Okay? We go out to see if we can figure out what's going on in your house, your home, your business, whatever. So look us up if you're having issues. If you're watching from YouTube today, please subscribe, and the way to do that is to click on the little ghost down in the left-hand corner with the magnifying glass and the Sherlock Holmes hat, and that'll make you a subscriber. We have, I think, close to 250 videos over there, different topics, not just paranormal, but different topics, like our guest last night, for instance. And just bear in mind, on June 23rd, we're going to have a celebration. It'll be our 200th show for this format. 200 shows. I can't believe I got that far with this, but I did. But anyway, be sure to be here because we're going to have some giveaways. T-shirts, books, things like that to give away. Hello, Jen. Jen's in the chat room. Jen's in the house. But anyway, tonight's guest is coming in on a topic that I had heard stories about this. In fact, occasionally you hear stories about this. People that get that get donor organs, and suddenly they kind of feel weird after getting the donor organ, you can feel somebody else's emotions and stuff, or you're seeing weird things that seem to be coming from somewhere else. Once in a while, TV will hit on this. Grey's Anatomy, right? They hit on everything. I've seen it on I've even seen it on Grey's Anatomy. But my guest tonight is a paranormal investigator, and she has heard reports of this stuff. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're also going to be talking about what she does with her investigating. So it's going to be a fun night. So without further ado, and you guys know how I am about names, I want to let her come in and pronounce her first and last name, and then we can go from there. Okay? All right. And let's hope she doesn't sound like she's on helium like last night. That I don't know what the heck that was last night. Let's see.
Hey, Charlotte.
The guy came on last night, and it was like the gremlins were in the computers. Because it sounded like not only on helium, but it was fast forward.
Oh my God.
That's crazy. And I'm trying to tell him, send me an email, I need your phone number. This isn't going to happen. So he finally ended up getting on the phone. He was on camera and he was on the phone the whole time. I don't know what that was. I never had that happen before. Maybe the ghost just didn't want him on the air.
Well, you never know. It's live shows too are like that, right? Like as soon as something's live, there's going to be something happen. So it's but audio issues are the worst when it comes to that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I never had that happen before. Yeah. Now tonight I'm expecting some issues. I'm going to warn everybody ahead of time. It's a heavy news night, with the Johnny Depp thing, and everybody in my neighborhood has Xfinity. So when that happens, they all get on the news at the same time we're doing the show, and then I'm watching these little warnings come up that the internet's shaky and all this, and it's just never ceases to amaze me. I love doing live shows though, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, live are always the best. They're some of my favorites as well.
So tell me your first and last name and tell me about you.
Sure. Yeah. So for the amazing audience, so my name is Morgan Knudsen, and I've been a paranormal researcher for about 20 years, researching parapsychology. And my great-great-grandfather was president of one of the first parapsychological associations in Canada, Albert Durrant Watson. So it's really come down through the family for me. And my program, Teaching the Living, was recently was a book that came out at the beginning of the year. You guys can get that on Amazon. And it's been taught in social work, psychology programs, and things like that throughout Canada. But mainly the goal of Teaching the Living was to empower people. It was to get people to understand that within parapsychology research, the keys to empowerment are there when it comes to hauntings and psi activity and things like that. So for me, it really was about putting the power back with the people and realizing that the activity that we get and what's going on in our outside experience is truly a mirror of what we have going on emotionally and energetically. So the whole goal is to get people to understand that, to take a look at themselves and bring this back into a place where it's not something external that's victimizing them, but it's actually something that we can deal with and control based on our emotions and our perspectives.
Very interesting. I never thought about it that way. So I've been doing this almost as long as you have, and yeah, I never looked at it that way.
Well, the psychology and the research is there to back it up. And, when you start digging into parapsychologists like Dr. William Roll, Dr. Scott Rogo, and it's a myriad of different researchers, Anthony Peake, a lot of people along the way that have published papers on this. And when you start to dig into it and you start to realize that so much of this stuff, when you understand psychokinesis, and you can understand now what is becoming sort of a blend of both parapsychology and quantum physics, we can start to see where some of this stuff is actually coming from. And what we have thought over the years is something that's external, we're now beginning to realize that no, it's not external at all, that this is oftentimes is projected. And with the new revelations that have come about in parapsychology, where we're beginning to realize that enough focus can actually manifest consciousnness outside of the body, then a lot of this stuff that we thought at one time was just completely weird and unexplainable is now actually becoming something that is explainable and tangible. And we've got more to do with it than what we originally had thought.
That goes along the line of poltergeist.
Yeah, it's sort of that idea that we have this ability to manipulate our environment with our minds, and I think it takes it a little bit further than that, because oftentimes, we think about it like, okay, well, if we pick up a spoon, we can bend a spoon kind of thing. But it's a very rudimentary way of seeing it now, where now we're beginning to understand things like, if you focus enough, that thought can become the thinker. And when you start to look at it that way, and you realize, like, what we're putting out there and what we're projecting is taking on an era of its own, then we can really start to have a hard look at ourselves. We can't not look at ourselves. We have to realize, like, oh my, I got a role in this.
What's scary is when you get older. My dad passed away in 2011, but then you start to realize how right your parents were, because my dad used to have a saying that said, if you wish hard enough and you hope hard enough, that dream will come true.
That's right.
And this is what you're talking about too. The Constantinos were working on a project with EVPs that way, where they were able to manifest and create the ghosts themselves on the EVP.
That's right. And it's been done before. There's been a number of experiments that have been set out that way, including a very famous one from Toronto called the Philip experiment. And during the Philip experiment, they were able to manifest a consciousness out of literally thin air. They made up a character by the name of Philip. And they focused on this idea of Philip, who had a backstory, and he had all this, like, he had a life. But he was completely fictional, and they were able to manifest him to the point where he was responding to questions. He was moving objects. He was responding to questions directly to the speaker who was asking the question. And this went on for quite a long time. And it was replicable in a second experiment with a character they called Lilith. Completely different group of people. The experiment was put on by the Toronto Society of Psychical Research and Mensa. And it was very successful and repeatable. It probably, to me, it's one of the most prolific experiments in parapsychology that's ever been done. The researcher Anthony Peake, he's actually looking at doing it and doing it again with new parameters in the UK, and it's it's stuff we can't ignore.
Well, there's a restaurant up here in the in the foothills that, for us, it's famous because it's been around for a long time as being haunted. And I remember going up there, and they said, well, the ghost, you can tell that she's there because you can smell violet and all this. I sure as heck smelled it when I was up there, got my EVPs and all that stuff. Turns out the people that own the restaurant made the story up. And so they were able to manifest it. And then every ghost hunting team that came in behind them, that, was there talking to this being, and the being got more colorful, and that's what's going on. It's stuck in the walls or wherever it's stuck in. But when you go up there, you're picking up something that's not even there.
Yeah, and I think, and it's so interesting because I think where people get stuck with this subject is they think, well, you're saying it's all in my head, and that's not what we're saying at all. It is that this is a projected phenomenon, and it's not that people are making it up. It's not that people are crazy, and it's not denying that there very well could be consciousness after death. I'm like a big believer in that
Right.
Consciousness is fundamental. It's not emergent. That that is something that we can tap into. But there's this overarching phenomenon that we can't ignore. And in cases like what you were just mentioning, you've got a situation where you're fueling this idea over and over. You've got these people focusing on these ideas, and they're turning it into like this egregore. And that ends up becoming a thinking, moving, feeling thing. And it ties into everything in our lives, and which I think people oftentimes miss. And it's we don't think of it as something that's relatable to something outside the paranormal, but it really is. It's we are creating in our world and in our environment through our thoughts and our focus, and that's huge.
Well, I know we have a 102 question questionnaire when we go out and run a prelim, and we're asking so many questions and personal questions too. How have you been feeling? What medications are you on? Have you been having these nightmares and all this? Have you guys been getting along? It's important to get that background because, like you say, that's what could be manifesting the activity.
Absolutely. And that's just exactly it. Is there's all of these very human factors that it comes back to, and it comes back to that almost every single time. When you start to break down the dynamic of the people and what's happening with the people, which is what my book Teaching the Living is about. And once you start to break that dynamic down, you really begin to realize that it is so much mirroring, the activity is so much mirroring the emotion and the energy of what's going on with the people. So at that point, it's less about the activity that's going on and more about taking a look and going, okay, how can we get these people the resources they need and get them to a better place? Because otherwise it's like this stuff around them is not going to change. They're just going to keep manifesting the same thing.
I wish every group was like your group and my group. That's what I wish. But they're not. I've got psychologists on staff. I've got former police negotiators on staff. So if I run into something like this, I'm able to send them have the psychologist talk with them and get them the help they need to deal with it.
And that's perfect. And I was very much the same way. I'm still really steeped in research. I never really had a team per se, but I'd have people on contract to call to bring in, and exactly the same way, because I definitely don't propose that I know everything about this stuff. And there's people that you have to surround yourself with, like you were saying, in order to bring the best resources to the people that need it. And it's not a one-stop shop, and it's not an overnight thing either. It's a process, and the people themselves have to be ready for it. And that, for me, I think is some of the most challenging work is, are these people ready for that change? Because the challenging thing with the paranormal, and I think especially hauntings, and I think this is what really throws a lot of people, and this is why they tend to turn to the idea that this is completely external and they're victims of it, is that when you get into this stuff, you really sometimes have to look at the dark places in yourself. And a lot of people would rather look at the dark, scary thing in the hallway than they'd rather look internally. And that's usually where people are just going, no, I just want you to wave a magic wand and make it better. Well, it's not going to work like that. So I think it really comes back to the people and their willingness to move forward.
I agree with you 100%. Absolutely. And that's like, I try to tell people, it's not like it is on TV. These groups that are out there want to be running around looking for ghosts, and everything's haunted and all this, but it's not like that. I mean, we have a huge responsibility when we go out to a residential or a business, for that matter, anything involving human beings, because if we don't cross every T and dot every I, we're not providing a good enough service.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think too, you mentioned just that, that level of responsibility, and I think it is so key, as we're going forward, especially in today's world, because we've got a lot of people right now that are feeling disempowered. We've got, hundreds and thousands of people that are, they're looking around, feeling like the world's out of control, feeling their lives are out of control for whatever reason. I mean, there's been so much going on in the last couple of years. And, I think we really have a responsibility as people who are almost ferrymen of the unknown, to turn around and say, provide the right information. I'll never forget, there was one of my dear friends, Lizette Coley, who's the president of the Parapsychology Foundation in New York. And she told me this story. It was during 9/11, and it was chaos. It was September 11th. People were passing away. There was this horrendous tragedy going on, and was so interesting because she said she was getting a flood of phone calls, and the phone calls weren't to check on her. The phone calls were people with misinformation about the paranormal, and they sort of bought they drunk the Kool-Aid of all of the TV shows where they're hearing things like, oh, people get stuck if they die a terrible death, and they're drinking the Kool-Aid of a lot of tropes that have been set up by television shows and things like that. And they were calling because they were desperate to understand what happened to their loved ones that had just jumped out of the towers. And it's like, I will never unhear that story. And she had to spend her time during 9/11 explaining to the people that was not based in science. This was not based in paranormal research. And it's just like, we have to be so careful about that information, because that audience is this is the audience that we're talking to. So we have to take it seriously, and we have to be responsible for that.
Well, I can't count, how many investigations I've gone in where people have done their own investigation.
Yep.
They already have the answers when you're out there, and I'm going, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. You've just been doing this the last month or so, and I run into that a lot. One of the questions, a couple of the questions we ask too is do they watch those shows, to find out, if they do, who they're watching. And then the other question is, how do you compare what's happening to you to a TV show?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think it's tough right now, because I think a lot of true parapsychology has been lost in the programming, and we've got this sort of phase that we're going through, I think, in entertainment right now, where anything to do with the paranormal has got to be very horror driven. So a lot of people are now associating parapsychology not only with the horror genre, but they're also associating it with the reality television genre, which has been such a problem, because organizations that I work with, like the Parapsychological Association and Parapsychology Foundation and Windbridge Institute, and all of these places that are the best minds in the world, and in regards to science and consciousness and all of this. And it gets overshadowed by these ideas of ghost hunting. And then you talk to the skeptics, and the skeptics are looking at these TV shows going like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And then they equate it with parapsychology, which is completely wrong. Right. And so it compounds a lot of issues for these people that are not only experiencing paranormal activity in their house, like what you're saying, but they're also, it's putting a damper on some of the actual research, which is phenomenal. I mean, this is the pinnacle of consciousness and understanding what that is. And yet you've got people that are, still thinking that it's about running around in the dark chasing ghosts with flashlights. And it's like, it just doesn't compare.
Well, you've been around as long as I have, and you could probably agree with this. When we first started doing this, there weren't a lot of groups out there.
Yeah.
When the
Yeah,
TV
very
shows
true.
came on, it was Uncle Bob, just like we were getting Uncle Bob. But as it's progressed, because the TV want the ratings, so the ghost got scarier and scarier and scarier. So almost every call we get is, "I have a demon in my house. I know it's a demon."
And I think what's sad about that aspect of it too is that statistically, it's something like 95 to 98% of people that report paranormal experiences are, it's really positive. So what people are getting shown is this tiny little infantile percentile of cases that are negative. The majority of people that report parapsychological phenomenon, they were usually are experiencing hope, and they're excited about it. It's changed their view on death. They feel like they're not alone. Like, it gives them all of these amazing positive connections.
Mhm.
And so you get this tiny little slice of it where people are walking away saying this was like really, really terrifying. And because it gets focused on, you then have all these individuals, I think, that are missing the connection they could have with
Yes.
their loved ones who have passed over. They're missing these opportunities because now they're thinking, okay, well, this is just evil. I'm just, it's all evil, it's all bad, it's all demons, or whatever they're saying. And now you've got this dynamic where you've just got people that are missing out on, I think, a part of who they are, which is non-physical.
Exactly, exactly. And I know, like, you probably get the same emails I do from the production companies. And it's never, okay, what case do you have that's interesting? It's always, what case do you have that has a dark entity or something bad going on? And I'm going, I don't do those. I don't get those.
Yeah.
I'm not that haven't had dark entities, but not every case is going to be a dark entity.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and it's hard, I think, to convince a lot of them as well that this stuff would do just as well if they promoted something positive. Like, I know I've had that conversation with a number of producers over the years where I've said, you guys would actually have a greater pool to pick from if you switched this around and started talking about cases that were inspirational, that had the same level of drama, that had the same level of amazement, but were actually focused on the positive. Because oftentimes, even the shows that I work for regularly, which have been great, they're always going, oh man, we're having a really hard time finding cases. I'm like, well, because you're picking from the wrong end of the pool. Like, you just switch over, and a lot of the time, what's interesting is that when you ask people, have you had a paranormal experience? What's fascinating is that they'll turn around and say no. But if you say, have you had an experience where you've seen a loved one? They'll say yes. And it's because they don't equate seeing a grandma who's passed away with something paranormal. They're like, yeah, but it was just grandma. So even the phrasing now has become, I think, almost antiquated and boxed in as something that's oh, I haven't had a terrible experience, so therefore I haven't had a paranormal experience. It's like,
Right.
no, you probably have, but yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I know you've done shows, and I know we've been up real close a couple times too, getting on to doing a show, having our own show. But I think the killer of the deal is that I'm refusing to bow down and go after the dark stuff. Not that I want it all positive and happy, but I don't want to do a constant thing where I have to create evidence. You know what I mean? To make it look good for TV, I'm not going to do that. So that's why they eventually we come real close, and then all of a sudden it's like, sorry, can't work with you. That's it.
Yeah,
But
and I know
I'm
I
gonna
know
stay
the
like this.
struggle.
I'm gonna stay like this because that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I know the struggle. I can't even count the ones that I've turned down myself, where it's and I mean, I've been really lucky with Paranormal 911 and haunted hospitals, and one of the reasons why I wanted to work with them was because I really like the fact that they're giving nurses and doctors and first responders a
Yes,
voice
yes,
in this, because oftentimes they are completely shunned for it. And
yes,
it's like, no, if you talk out and you speak out about this, then you might lose your job, you might get
yes,
labeled as crazy.
yes.
So it was exciting to me to be a part of that, because I was like, okay, now we're doing something very meaningful, and we're able to give these people a voice. And the interviews, when they come in to do their interview, it's like it just happened to them yesterday.
Mhm.
They're emotional, it's amazing. And I think there's a lot of relief with a lot of them when they're realizing like they're not going to be criticized for this, and they're risking a lot. So I've been really lucky with those shows, but it's, yeah, it's something that I've always been really conscious on. And like you, I've been offered, I can't even count the amount of sort of ghost hunter type format shows. And every single time I'm like, it's just missing the mark. Like it just keeps missing the mark. So yeah, I've become very picky.
Well, I can say my two favorite, out of all the paranormal shows on, Paranormal 911 and the Haunted Hospitals are my favorite, because those people on those shows are trained, the witnesses are trained observers.
Yeah. And they are not, there is no coaching going on either.
No,
no coaching. And, and the producers that I get to work with are absolutely phenomenal. And they really focus on being able to tell that person's story and letting them tell their story. They don't pass them a script. They don't say, just say this or just say that. Everything that's coming out of these people is their genuine emotion and their genuine feelings about it. So it's like, it's a special project to be a part of. They really care about what's going on.
Absolutely. Now that we've had our say, let's talk about donated organs. What have you found? I mean, in your research and in looking into this, what's going on with that?
Well, it's really interesting because there's been a number of researchers that have pondered this idea, and that when you get a donated organ or something like that, that there is some sort of like transfer of memory, of thought, of personality, all of these things that seems to come through. And what's really interesting about this is the fact that, like, my mom actually had a personal friend who had this happen. She ended up having a double lung transplant, and when she came out of it, she was 100% different person, like completely 180 from what she used to be. And it was just the strangest thing. But people report all sorts of things. They report memories. They report new talents, where they went under not being able to play a piano and they woke up being able to play a piano, or having completely disliked one food and now they love that food, or they're into sports all of a sudden and they hated sports before. And each of these traits, what they discover later, actually end up having to do with the person who passed away. So there's theories that are going around right now about this, and very similar to theories of how things like psychometry work, which is really interesting and very much tied in together, where they're realizing now that biologically our memory cells are not just in our brain. Our memory cells are everywhere. And one of the theories that's coming around is that you can translate these or transfer these memory cells not only throughout your body, but also into things you touch. And so it's a really, really interesting bit of research that's come to light over the years. But they're wondering at this point if that's how psychometry works as well, is that you've got people that are just really able to read these memory cells, and they can pick up, they can pick up an object or something like that. And, they can tell by picking up and sensing these memory cells who last picked up this lip gloss, and get little bits and pieces about that person. So they're thinking that it has to do very much it has to do very much with the same phenomenon as the organs, where there's memory cells that are being registered and read, and that's what might be coming through. So I find it really, really interesting, but it's it's pretty new, and it's
that is interesting. I mean, who would have figured that, somebody's, like, let's say liver. I mean, because I can understand maybe a heart transplant, maybe, but something like a liver or a lung that's so far out of the way in the body, would do that.
Yeah, but yet we know that there's memory cells, for example, in the gut, in the stomach. When people turn around and say like they've got a gut feeling or something like that, we know now that there's a biological reason for it. And so it's translating into all these different bits and pieces of ourselves. And I think it just, every time we turn around, there's new discoveries that are coming out about just how advanced the human body really is, and our ability to pick up and read those things. And I always think about, I've got a fellow who I work with who's amazing at psychometry and can pick up objects and pick up dates and names and all this kind of thing. And it was always interesting to me because there were times where if it was an object that, say, had been handled a lot or whatever, he always had a harder time with it. And it's which is in line with the memory cell theory, which is the fact that, if you've got 30 people handling an object, it's going to be a lot harder to pick up on these individual memory cells and interpret them. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's very fascinating.
I heard a story. Somebody that had a liver transplant woke up at the hospital, was starting to write things left-handed, and they were never left-handed.
Yeah.
It's just so bizarre. The whole thing is
so it's super weird. It's like it's really, really weird. But yet there's accounts of this all over the place, and they're common. You have people picking up on sometimes very few things, or sometimes it's a complete personality change, and or people are just, they wake up and it's just not the same person. Their loved ones are like, who the hell is this? But it seems to be something that's reported.
It's just, and like I said earlier in the intro on this, TV shows occasionally will do this and have this in there that people can feel stuff. What do you think? I mean, when we talk about memory cells, all over our bodies, I mean, that boggles my mind.
Yeah.
Honestly, it really boggles my mind to think that a liver or a lung could carry, or a kidney even, could carry a memory cell like that. And then, as it is, not only that, transmit it to the brain so that the person, functions like that. And the cases you've looked at, well, tell me, in the cases you've looked at, how current is, I mean, how many cases end up that way, do you think?
I don't even know. I mean, I'm not a expert in that specific area, so I can't really say to numbers. But I mean, you can definitely start to dig into it and begin to look at what this is. Like Dr. William Roll, he did some work into it. There was an article published about the idea in the Advancements for Parapsychological Research 10th edition, and it was really, really fascinating, and it was something that definitely stuck out to me. So I think we're just beginning to look into this in a very real way. It wouldn't surprise me if in the next, I would say, like 5 to 10 years, that we're starting to see a little bit more understanding in this, because of just the advancements and understanding that we do make impressions on their environment in a way that we didn't realize before. But I think we kind of have to get our heads out of the idea that we have this very finite body, and that it's working in this very finite way. And I think we're starting to get there with the idea that the brain is a translator of consciousness rather than the generator of consciousness. And as that model starts to change with the help of things like quantum physics and things like that, I think people are going to be able to wrap their heads around this concept a little bit more, that we are picking up on stuff that is so outside of our initial, what we think is our five senses. And it's going to be something, there's going to be stuff come out of this that I think we're just touching on.
Question in the chat room says, what about blood transfusions?
I don't know about that. I haven't read any studies on that. But yeah, I don't know. That's a really interesting question, though.
Well, it's like you say, when we think about traits and doing things left-handed, whatever, DNA comes up, because that's the DNA that's running through our families. But to think about, somebody, some memory cells or something coming off a lung that's gonna, change that. Wow.
Yeah, it's really wild. But yet, we've got document after document after document of people having these experiences, or having dreams or nightmares, or suddenly becoming afraid of something that they weren't afraid of before. That, I mean, it's learned behavior. That's not something that's coming down DNA wise. That's a fear is it's either instinctual or it's learned. And in my new book, The Gift of Instinct, I actually talk about that a little bit, where you have these two separate categories of fear, where you've got the instinctual stuff, where not to turn around and, grab something that's really, really hot, like fire or something like that. But then you've got this other side where you've got these learned fears, which is things that you've told yourself and you're responding to a story that can be unlearned depending on what it is. And, so some of these, and that's what makes some of these cases really interesting, where if you've got, say, for an example, somebody who, disliked a food and then starts liking that food all of a sudden, or, you've got somebody who's, had a talent or didn't have a talent and all of a sudden has this amazing talent and it was the person before. Well, that's learned. So that's another factor that makes this really weird.
Jerry says, it's been said, I'm just going to remember what Jerry says, if the nose on your face looks like your aunt's, then that's cell memory. Okay.
Interesting. Very cool.
I'll go with that. But what's so fascinating about this is that, I mean, I wonder if they could turn this into some kind of, how the government is. And it makes you wonder whether or not they can't turn this into something other than what it is. I mean, you don't want people with predispositions for this. Okay? So somebody dies and let's say they're not a very nice person. Okay, we're not going to give out those organs. But with this guy, we want him to be an artist. We want him to be this. So let's give this guy this organ.
It's an interesting idea, and I think, who knows? We might start seeing more of that. I think they would have, they would run into massive ethics problems. I don't know how they would get around the ethics problem with it. Because even nowadays, you can't like legally engineer your kids, and so I think they would end up in some massive ethics problems with it. But I mean, you know what? Like going in terms of the way the world's going right now, I don't know. There is a lot of potential for understanding this, and it does make you wonder, where is that going to go? Where are they going to take that to the next level once they discover what it is? And can those certain cells be isolated?
Right.
Can you decide which of these cells are doing the job of, talent or taste or whatever? Can you isolate it? I don't know.
Let's see. Okay, she says, what about the victims? Okay, here's Livy says, what about the victims of organ harvesting and the trauma that goes with it?
That's interesting. I don't know. I don't know if there's been any studies done on that or not. I've not heard of any, but not to say that there isn't. It's not out there.
Absolutely. I was thinking of this book I read a long, long time ago, and it had to do with being able to go into so somebody would give a gene sample when they were pregnant. Gene sampled themselves, gene sampled the baby. They were able to look at the alcoholism gene or whatever was bad. And the idea behind all this was, it was in the future, of course, that they were able to take those particular genes out. And this sounds, this is close to what that is. When you think about it.
It is and it isn't, because as I say, I think being able to isolate those, and I think there's still we really have a base understanding in terms of memory cells as well. It's not to the point, I don't think, where we've got almost like a mapping a genome for memory cells or anything like that. So it's a really gray area in terms of what could be done with it, where they're going to go with it, if they can possibly isolate this to the point where all of a sudden you've got something that can be changed around or manipulated or or influenced in some way. It'd be interesting to see where that takes us.
I had heard on another show that they were doing studies in that. It
wouldn't surprise me at all.
It's just in the trial periods of looking at people's genes and picking out the bad stuff. So that's crazy if they do that, because we're going to have a bunch of race of perfect people if they do that.
Well, it's and there's so many ethics lines with it, right? If you're doing that, then at what point, at what point is this, even child abuse, right? Like if you've got, there's that line as well. So yeah, it would be really, really intriguing. I think I think right now, in terms of at least from what I've read and whatnot, in terms of the parapsychology end, I think what they're really fascinated with is that when we're interacting and we're, say for example, like, interacting with our environment or whatever's going on, that we're leaving these bits and pieces of ourselves, even without that level of manipulation, like without that level of cellular manipulation. With this, we're leaving bits and pieces of ourselves like on tables when we touch them or whatever. And like, it's a really interesting idea that we're leaving these imprints. And like, just to go back to things like the Philip experiment and things like that, here we are just leaving imprint with thought alone. We're projecting this thought, or we're projecting these things, and then we're imprinting, if the cellular memory thing, when we're physically, interacting with something is correct, we're leaving those imprints as well. So it's like, here we have an environment where we're like imprinting on these various things. And like, I don't think people think about it that way. We think that we're kind of just apart from the environment that we're in, and that's just not true.
Well, I was just thinking while you were talking too, drinking a glass of water. All it would take is someone to grab that glass after you've drank from it. And let's say you have positive attributes that somebody would be interested in. It wouldn't even necessarily, if it gets that far, it wouldn't even necessarily have to be the government. Maybe somebody's sitting having dinner in a restaurant, and they know you to be, very, very intelligent. You graduated from Harvard or whatever, And so if you drink from that thing of water, and they go over steal the glass, preserve your saliva, and say, hey, look, I'm going to have this baby. Let's add this to this.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily think that it's that simple. Like, I mean, I think at least with what I've come to understand about it and whatnot, and as I say, like, I am no expert in it at all, but what I've come to understand with it as I think there's something about that integration. I think there's something about that integration when you're like, getting that organ transplant or something like that, the integration with your physical body. I think that seems to be like one of the key factors here. Sure. with what this is. So I think it's oversimplifying just to turn around and say, like, just take a drink from a glass of water. I think there's something far more like physical going on with it, that our bodies somehow absorbing or accumulating it and whatever. But I mean, as I say, it's all speculation because I'm no expert in it, so I don't know.
It's like a virus. It's like cell mutation. Whatever cells are on that organ are going to merge with the cells in your body.
Yeah, the brain's translating it somehow, right?
Yeah, like, they keep produce more and more and more. The next thing you know, you're left-handed when you were really right-handed. That kind of stuff going on. But I can see that happening. I really can. I've read some of those reports too, like you have, of this happening to people, and it's cool in some cases.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can wake up with a talent that you didn't know you had. Like, that's right. You didn't have before, but now all of a sudden you've got this amazing talent. So, like, yeah, I mean, it's almost like getting struck by lightning in a way, where it's like you hear these people that get struck by lightning, and all of a sudden they've got these weird abilities. Yeah. And it's like, our bodies and stuff like that are so malleable when it comes to anything like this, that I don't know, it's really quite interesting.
And what I find interesting now that they're growing stuff, is that this is where this all lines to for me is you got your normal donors that pass away, and now they're able to grow. They're getting to the point where they can actually grow these things. It makes you wonder if they're going to be able to insert cells on, like I said, these things to do that.
Yeah, it'd be really, really interesting. Like if they reach the point where they realize that you can add a certain talent and things like that. Like, I know they've hit the point where they can they're looking at being able to make somebody more predispositioned to be something and whatever. But yeah, I think once they understand like the reach of what cellular memory actually means, and because as I say, I think right now we're so in the infant stages of what that looks like, and realizing that, if we are in fact kind of depositing, like, these memory cells different places, and how our brains are interpreting it. And then you've got that factor on top of it, which is, like, everybody's interpreting it seemingly differently. Like, not everybody that gets an organ transplant, for example, is picking up on character traits. Like, that's not consistent either. So there's some sort of variable that's in there that's making this happen. And the same thing with psychic phenomena and things like psychometry. Not everybody that picks up an item is, able to read, the item in terms of who picked it up. So there's a variable there that's not being understood either. So, like, for me, I think that would be the most interesting part about this. Is it's like, okay, well, what is that variable then? How is it, for example, that, somebody like my colleague Matt can pick up, a sword and tell you who was wielding it in the 1600s, but yet, I mean, I can pick up that same sword and I've got no idea. Like, I'm not reading any of that. So I think there's a lot of factors that are at play that I think we just don't know.
What another theory too is, like, when we talk about psychics, everybody's born with the ability. As we get older, we lose it because we're busy doing other things, and then we get into a position like, say, your friend Matt, right? And he gets into doing ghost hunting or whatever, and suddenly he's triggering on stuff because it's all coming out. So maybe these people that are having these things happen to them had this talent when they were young, which nobody knew about. And by getting these cells, these new cells introduced, it's bringing the stuff back out.
Well, it's hard to know, because I mean, like, when you look into the history and researching, or the research that they know about psychics and mediums and things like that, like, there doesn't seem to be something that's necessarily pathological. It doesn't seem to necessarily be passed down, although a lot of people, in one family will often report saying, okay, well, my grandmother was psychic and so am I. But it doesn't seem to be something that is necessarily passed down. That's not been consistent. So it doesn't seem to really have any basis in that. But they have decided, and they have realized over the years, that there are certain character traits that will actually bring it out. People who are, for example, more outgoing, people who are less negative, people who are able to relax a lot better, and whatnot. Those people tend to have better results in, say, for example, like the Gansfeld experiments or remote viewing experiments, out-of-body experience tests, things like that, and research. And they've had more success with that. So it seems to be something that is more of a learned behavior. It's not necessarily something that you're going to inherit, or that you're biologically hardwired for. There's certain things that you can do that will actually help it along. And then there's, of course, like, there's neurological components that are going into it that I think are being studied by doctors like Dr. Alexander Moira Almeida in South America. He's been doing some amazing research with fMRIs and mediums, and his studies are quite incredible. But I think I don't necessarily believe that it's something to do with anything cellular. I think it's got to do either with something that's both learned and something that's more neurologically based.
Okay. I was just thinking too, while you were saying that, is, right now when people receive donor organs, they don't know who the donor is. But I'm just wondering if some of these people that get these traits are able to research back and find out, who they got it from.
Well, some have, because or they've become friends with the family or something like that of the loved one who's passed away, and that seems to be where some of this is coming from. Where they say, okay, well, this person just, I got their heart or something like that, and then they're coming out with things, or they're doing things that the family is saying, like, oh my God, that was so and so, that's absolutely something that he used to love to do, and stuff like that. So that seems to be where a lot of the time that this is coming from, is like family members and whatnot that knew the person when they were alive.
See, it's absolutely fascinating to me, the whole subject. Libby says that her grandmother is. Let me go back here. This was earlier in the chat. She says my best friend recently, recently passed in February and donated her beautiful eyes to a blind person who now sees. That's cool.
That's amazing. That's lovely. Yeah.
I sure wonder many things. So I mean, it makes you wonder. It really does. I mean, in fact, it's incredible technology to even be able to do that, to insert eyeballs into somebody. I mean, it boggles the mind.
Yeah, it does. It's so interesting because you get these amazing cases and whatever. And I think that's part of what makes parapsychology so incredible, is that it really is the leading edge of science. And that's what people miss out on, to just going back to the TV shows and things like that. That's really what people miss out on when it comes to this stuff, is that it's not about running around in the dark with a camera. It's like it's about stories like what we're talking about right now. This is what people are about. This is what consciousness is at its core, and these amazing experiences that people are having, where it's like, hey, we've got all of these incredible stories, and I don't know, they're just getting missed, I think, by a lot of the media hype and things like that are going on, when it's like, this is totally worth media hype. Like, this is cool. Like,
Cool. Yeah. So somebody should do a documentary on this.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's fascinating, and I think for the people, especially who have experienced this firsthand, I mean, it's really, really wild.
I mean, this runs along the line of past lives.
Totally, and and it ties in with that I think quite substantially, where you start looking at, especially kids, for example, like Dr. Ian Stevenson, and he spent a lot of his career looking at past lives, but specifically children. Right. And these kids that have had absolutely no contact whatsoever with these people who have passed away, and yet they absolutely 100% know where they lived. They remember the people around them. They remember, like, it's just absolutely wild. So to me, it's really phenomenal when you start to delve into this stuff, that we just goes to show, like, we are not just this finite meat suit that we think we are.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if there's been any cases where a person has, like, for instance, in Libby's friend's case, gotten donated eyes, and then they recognize somebody just on the street, and have tried to figure out who it is because they knew them.
That would be really, really interesting. And then you got to wonder, like, is it something, is it something to do with the eyes, or is it then something to do with past life, or where is the connection then? Right. Because that it opens a whole new door. As it's like, okay, well, if you're recognizing this person, is it because you've got, you now have the memory of this person at some point? Is it because, like, I mean, it opens up a whole Pandora's box.
It does, and whoever cracks this thing is going to be really famous, because I mean,
Nobel Prize stuff. I think
this is. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating to think about, and, like, I mean, I can see it. I mean, when you get the organs are still alive. They're still preserving those organs, so they're still pumping. And again, when your blood hits it and your cells hit it and they start combining with their cells, this is what happens. Like I said, it's like a virus, where it just expands, and that's why this starts to take over.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see in the next number of years, like, where we get to with this type of thing, because I think that the physicians and people of medical science who were once thinking, this is the body and that's it, and we kind of know all there is to know, and that's sort of the end of it. I think they're beginning to realize now that it's like, no, wait a minute, like, there's something more that's going on that we haven't quite figured out, and I think it's good for them to get thrown loops every once in a while, so that it's like, you really don't know, like, we really have so much more to understand. And I think the more parapsychology lends to the idea that we are, as I say, we're not just meat suits walking around, like, there's something else going on here. Our brains are translating more than just neurons. that are firing, there's something else happening. And there's been a lot of research with things like the pineal gland and things like that people are beginning to wonder if that's playing into translating consciousness and all sorts of things. But I mean, now as we're starting to expand our definition of the mind and the brain outside of the physical brain, I think a lot of these questions are going to start to get answered.
Well, like Liberty just said, people are still alive when they take the organs.
Yeah.
And move them. Then I was thinking, as you were saying that, it's taken a long time for physicians to accept NDEs even.
Yeah, and it's coming. And what's neat to about things like near-death experiences, you've got organizations like the Monroe Institute, for instance, that are fully into this understanding and research, but places like the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and some of the major universities like Northampton, Princeton, universities like that are really taking it seriously and conducting these experiments. Yale just came out with a program called COPE, and they've been looking at it over the last couple of years, and I think people are beginning to understand that it's like, no, this is not somebody's flights of fancy, or oh, they would like this to be true, and it's just a pretty story. And it's like, no, there's something is going on, and I think they're beginning to realize that now. One of the key players that really pushed this into the forefront was Dr. Eben Alexander, who wrote Proof of Heaven. And he was a neurologist, and he ended up with a very strange case of meningitis. And I wrote about him in The Gift of Instinct, where he had this very rare case of meningitis, and he essentially died. He ended up in this coma, and he had this incredible experience where he encountered what he later discovered to be his sister, who he had never met. His sister had passed away a long time ago, and he had never met her. And he came back with all of this incredible information and these stories that he experienced. And of course, all his critics came forward and said, oh, you were on medication, and your brain was traumatized, and oh, that's what happened to you, and so on and so forth. But nobody could explain the fact that he'd seen his sister, and that who he had never met, who he recognized immediately. And he had this incredible story to tell, and he wrote a book about it. And of course, here's a guy, he's a neurologist. Like, this is not somebody who was a layman that's, just wishful thinking. This is somebody who is critically thinking through his experience, and he's going, this happened. And it's an absolutely fascinating story, and something that I think he was it just touched him. He's been speaking on this now, and for speaking engagements and TED Talks and stuff like that for a long time. But it's like, here you've got people who are having these experiences that are not just, oh, they're a religious zealot, or they're, whatever. It's like, no, these are scientists that are going, like, this is something else.
Mm-hmm. That's like that story that little boy that they made the movie out of. He had I think it was a dead brother that he didn't even know about.
Yeah, and that happens frequently, where people are, they're meeting these individuals on the other side. Robert Monroe, who founded the Monroe Institute, when he started experimenting with sound technology, and because he was an audio engineer, and when he started experimenting with sound technology and inducing out-of-body experiences, one of the things he did, he had two friends pass away, and he induced one of his out-of-body experiences, and actually ended up meeting one of the friends while he was in this out-of-body experience. And it was really, really fascinating for him, and it pushed him to build the Monroe Institute. And he later helped to train the CIA in remote viewing and out-of-body experiences, in terms of training them for their program. One of their espionage programs was called the Gateway Project. And it was impactful enough that it really, really got people's attention. And one of the remote viewers that worked there, Robert McGonigal, he turned around and ended up working for the Monroe Institute, and is still working for the Monroe Institute. But the programs and the studies and whatnot, it's no joke. It's being studied by real people.
See, in summary, like I said before, there's going to be answers coming. They're forthcoming.
Yeah.
It's just slow for the scientists to get on board to look at this stuff.
Well, and the damn thing is, they are on board. And I think what's happening though is that you've got people who, they are on board, they are taking it seriously and whatnot. And then you've got this slice of people who are militant about the fact that it's not happening. And I think that's where some of this gets really lost is that, the real scientists, the people who are, considered, the legit scientists in the labs and universities like Princeton and Yale and Oxford and all these Northampton and whatnot, they are involved. They are doing the research. They are involved. They're publishing papers constantly. There's thousands of papers. You go to academia.edu, and I mean, there are thousands of papers out there that are on this subject that are published. They are peer-reviewed papers. And, and then you've got this fine line of these skeptics that are saying, oh, no, that's not happening. That doesn't exist. We're past that. We're past that. We know it exists. We know it's happening. And, now it's not a matter of if it's happening, it's why. Why is this going on? What's causing it? So, I mean, I think the skeptics and whatnot, that are back going like, oh, this doesn't exist, catch up. Like, we're past this already. Let's start asking the questions that are going to matter.
The skeptics, I always thought of it this way. We have the Mark Twain riverboat here in Sacramento. And there's the skeptics that if Mark Twain appeared to them in three-dimensional form, but he still looked like a ghost, and he shook their hand and introduced himself and slapped him across the face, they would still think there was something more to it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And what I've found over the years of doing this, because I get questions about that a lot. It's like, well, what do you say to the skeptics and whatnot? And I mean, honestly, it kind of comes down to a couple of things. Is that there's enough evidence out there. There's enough peer-reviewed papers. There's enough out there that would blow most people's minds away. And even Jessica Utz, the president of the Statistical Association, the American Statistical Association, she had come out a number of years back and said that literally the level of testing that goes into something like Advil is so much less than it goes into the study of psi, that if Advil was put up against a test that were as rigorous as the psi studies, it would fail. And yet everybody will take it for a headache. Everybody will pick up an Advil and take it and know it works. Where, for some reason, you can put all these papers together and you still get these people that are like, it doesn't work. But I think what it is, and I've thought about this long and hard over the years, is like, what makes this so difficult for people? And I think it's because the paranormal and non-physical causes us to challenge a paradigm of the world around us. Yes. And it screws up people who have defined their physical world as physical. Yes. And it's like, if you've got somebody who is, has finally sort of gotten control of their world by describing it and viewing it as something completely physical, then by turning around and saying, okay, now we're going to introduce this new factor, it's like you're not asking them to look at evidence. You're asking them to completely alter how they're able to cope with what they're seeing. And I think that's where it gets lost. So immediately you just get, well, that's crap, or that's stupid, or that doesn't make sense, or whatever, when it's like, no, there's plenty of evidence to say otherwise.
Absolutely. Morgan, this has been fun.
Absolutely, it has.
It's been a great hour. I'd love to get you back on again. I could talk to you for hours.
Sounds great to me.
Topic, I'll be sure to look. I'll be sure to look out for you on my two favorite shows.
Oh, thank you.
What's next for you?
Oh gosh, I'm always doing my podcast, Supernatural Circumstances. That's running any platform you want to download it on. It's there. Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. So Supernatural Circumstances with myself and my co-host Mike Brown from Dark Poutine. And we've got, of course, my new book that just came out, The Gift of Instinct, Paranormal Lessons for an Extraordinary World, is really about empowerment. It's about finding your life's purpose. It's about understanding exactly what we've been talking about tonight. There's a non-physical connection in everything we do, and that non-physical connection is there. It is available to us, and it will draw us forward in instinct and pull us forward to what we really want in life. And the book is divided up into 10 lessons, and each lesson talks about people like Robert Monroe, J.B. Rhine, Eileen Garrett, all of these names in parapsychology who went through hell, and what pulled them through was their ability to tune into non-physical, and we all have that. So that's what the gift of instinct is about. So there's that, and I'm hoping to bring more of my live shows and whatnot to the world in the next number of months, because that's what I love to do the most is teach, do live presentations. And then season 4 of Haunted Hospitals shall be out this year as well. So that'll be something people can look forward to.
We have a lot in common, you and I.
I think so too.
You know, I'm turning down paranormal shows that don't want to show that stuff. So therefore, my answer is I'm making my own documentaries.
Smart.
So I can control them. I'm not going to be told, okay, act like you're scared of something in the corner. It's not going to happen in my life.
Yeah.
So we have a lot in common.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to have you on again at some point. Oh my God, this was great.
This was absolutely great. I'm so glad you asked, and we'll definitely do it again.
All right. How do people find you?
People can find me on entityseeker.ca. So it's not plural, entityseeker.ca. Website has everything. You can get the books. You can watch all my videos. Spiritual health care is on there, all my classes. You can, the link to the podcast is there. It is really is a one-stop shop, and you can follow me on Facebook. Just Google Entityseeker, you'll find it, or my name, you'll find it, and whatnot. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, all the usual stuff. And yeah, but entityseeker.ca, you can get links to absolutely all of that. So
sounds good. All right. Well, you have a great evening. Okay.
You too. See you.
Thank you
Bye, everyone.
much. All right. Let's get you. There we go. Button. I gotta find the buttons. Okay. All right. That was a great show. I like Morgan a lot. She and I, our groups operate similar. I can honestly say that our two paranormal groups operate similarly, and it's taken years to get to the point that we can operate like that. Anyway, tomorrow, Janet Lindgren is going to be on. She's 85 years young. She's a psychologist, and she deals with dreams. So she's going to be on to talk about dreams. And if you have any dreams that you would like to talk to her about or let her know about, she will be here and she can talk to you about them. So she's going to be joining us tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Okay? We're going to be here at our usual time. But anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. If you are watching from YouTube, please subscribe. Again, there's that little ghost down in the bottom right-hand corner with the magnifying glass and the Sherlock Holmes hat on. That's our little YouTube mascot. Please subscribe through that. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated my show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We are equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. If you want to check out the California Haunts Paranormal team, check us out at californiahaunts.org, or you can come to californiahauntsradio.com to check out all our shows, because there's always a link over there to get into our YouTube page, which has all of our shows. Plus, there's also a link to our Blog Talk shows, because before we did this, for the last 2 years, we were on Blog Talk for around almost 10 years doing the show. So you can check those out as well. You see the ticker down at the bottom. That's because our team doesn't take any money to investigate. So everything that we do comes out of my pocket, as I'm the owner, technically I'm the owner of the team. The equipment, the computer for this, the mics, everything. So if something breaks, comes out of my pocket. If you could find it in your heart to help keep us on the air so we can keep doing this, more guests, like Morgan, that would be great. You can do that at paypal.me at California Haunts. Or if you're uncomfortable with PayPal, Venmo, and then type in California Haunts. But I want to thank you all for coming tonight. And I'm going to show you Morgan's information. Thank you, Libby. And I want to thank the people in the chat room tonight. Let's do that. Libby was in the chat room. Jerry was in the chat room. Nancy was in the chat room. Marisa was in the chat room. And Jen was in the chat room tonight. So thank you all for coming and being involved in the chat. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to show you Morgan's contact information and her books. And then I'm going to get the hell out of here. Okay, here we go. Okay, website, that's entityseeker.ca. Yeah, hit the mic. See, that's the kind of night I'm having. Okay, Teaching the Living is one of the books, and The Gift of Instinct is the other book. And you can get to those at Amazon, or you can go to Morgan's website and get them there. Okay, well, I'm going to get out of here. It's hot, and you can hear the air conditioner in the background. It is just hot. And remember, we also have a TikTok. So if you're ever on TikTok, come join us over on TikTok. It's under California Haunts. Anyway, I will see you tomorrow. Have a good evening.